like you to read us your fun fact, please.
Oh, come on.
Come on, Doug. You wrote it. It's fantastic. It's better coming from you than me.
Oh, geez.
All right, here we go. Here we go.
My fun facts?
Yeah,
Okay.
Michael's going to love this. Michael, are you listening?
You really want to put me on the spot?
I do. It's my job. Oh, he's blushing.
Well, I was born and raised on Long Island, New York. Woo! How you doing?
Mets fan.
Yes!
Yes!
Yes! Although they did not win.
I know.
I was a little friendly. Yes, I'm a Mets fan. Forget about it. You know they lost. Now, if that ain't New York, nothing is. So, unfortunately, I moved out of New York like 20 some odd years ago, so I've lost my accent. But forget about it. I'm okay. I've lived in Massachusetts, Philadelphia, and I've been in Denver since 1991. Okay, so I consider myself a Denverite, Coloradan at this point. I started my career back in 1989 in clinical research. I originally started out as a nurse in a respiratory intensive care unit back on Long Island, and a industry job posed itself in research, and I jumped on that, and I've been in research ever since. So I've worked predominantly for medical device companies. I did spend one company was a drug company. I started out in drugs. I didn't do well in drugs, so I went to devices. And I've been in devices ever since. This is my first academic job. I've never worked in an academic facility before. So I'm still learning the academic side of research. And it's been tough after 20 some odd years doing industry coming to an academic center. But I'm enjoying it. I'm learning a lot. The group of people I work with at this Clinical Research Support Center are awesome. And so hopefully I can, this is going to be dumbed down a lot from the previous presentation. Not a lot of technical information, but it's a good overview. How many here have ever participated in clinical research? All of you or none of you? Some of you? Okay, that's good. So we have some novice here that may not understand clinical research totally, but I'm sure you have some knowledge about it. So, let's move forward. So let's look, and the previous presenter sort of touch on this a little bit, but what's the difference between clinical practice and clinical research? Clinical practice is, basically the practice of medicine, approved or known therapies that are used consistently, okay, and are applied to cure disease or cure symptoms or whatever. So it's basically the practice of medicine. The doctor knows what's best for you, usually, but they're all approved types of processes, whether it's a treatment, a drug, a device. They've all gone through the approval process and they're on the market type of thing. Versus clinical research, it's an attempt to answer questions. So it's usually products that may be on the market, okay, but now they want to try it for a different indication that it's not approved for. Okay, so let's take a simple aspirin. Okay, you know what aspirin is used for. Now they want to use aspirin to carry over from the previous presentation. Use aspirin to cure colorectal cancer. It's a long shot, but if they want to do that, now they have to do clinical research to prove that. So they have to go through all the processes in order to develop the study, get it approved by the government, get it approved by the local institutional review board, which I'll be talking about a little bit. But again, it's an attempt to answer a question or a new question, okay, and they have to follow strict guidelines within what they call the study protocol. The protocol is basically, this is how you do your study, and you have to follow it. You cannot deviate from it generally. Okay, so practice medicine, approved therapies, devices, drugs, things of that nature. Clinical research could be the same drug, but for a different indication that it's not approved for. Okay, so you have to do clinical research studies in order to prove that it is safe and effective. Okay, so let's talk about the process for a new drug that's coming out, a new developed drug. You want to do a clinical research study on that drug, whether it's the company that developed the product, or whether it's like here in an academic setting, our investigators our sponsor investigators. Okay, so they take on the role of the company basically. So they have to file for the investigational new drug application with the FDA. So they have to present to the FDA, we want to do a study on this drug for this indication which it's not approved for, and they are to, you know, provide all the information that they have to the FDA to get their application. They cannot do the study until the FDA says we approve your investigational new drug application. Okay. So yes, the government has a role to play in it. And they'll look at all the previous history and so forth about the product, and if they believe, and the protocol that the investigator has written, okay, saying this is how we're going to conduct our study. Okay, if they agree with everything, they say yes, you have an approved IND, you may start your study. Okay, same thing with the device. Okay, pacemakers, blood pressure cuffs, thermometers, anything that's not a drug is typically a device, really generally speaking. Okay, so it's not taken internally or injected and absorbed, but it's implanted in you or used on you. Okay, it's a device. Okay, they have to go through the same process. A manufacturer develops a new pacemaker, okay, or they change how the pacemaker works. Now it's going to pace the heart in a different way that has not been done before. So it's a new indication. Okay, they have to go and get it, what they call an IDE, Investigational Device Exemption, meaning they're exempt from the general regulations. Okay, now they can use this product for the new indication in clinical research. So basically the same process, required to study a new medical device that may include significant risk as part of its use. Okay, and the significant risk means that, you know, if something should go wrong or if it's not used properly, the patient may be harmed. And the key word there is maybe. Okay? Yes, sir?
So is this only required if you're dealing with human patients? If you're doing lab work on mice,
yeah,
you don't need to do
this.
Right?
This is all human,
okay.
Human research. Good question. Okay? So again, significant risk means that, you know, if something should not go right, or even it does go right, there is a risk to implant a pacemaker. There's a risk just to implant it. Okay? Aside from the pacemaker working. So there's a risk associated with implanting the product, and there's a risk associated if the pacemaker fails to function as it's indicated. So therefore, there's a significant risk. May also be required for the use of a medical device in a research in a new way. So as I said before, it's already approved. Okay, it's nothing brand new, but now they're going to look for a different indication, or they're going to apply it differently. Then it's got to go through the research to prove that the way you're using it, even though it's not approved for that use, is safe and effective. Okay? But both have to be submitted to the FDA before you can even move forward and start your study. Yes, ma'am?
So like with your example with the pacemaker, so once it goes through the first phases of being accepted and approved by the FDA, unless they change the function of it, how they want to use it.
Right.
They have to go through the whole process again, or it's a separate process to get the new way of using it approved?
No, same
process.
Same process. Just the same as it was when it first came out. Okay. Now they're going to change the indication. They're going to change the way it looks, the way it feels, the way it's implanted. Anything they change to it that's not been approved before, they have to go through the whole process again. Okay. Same thing again. Okay. Next. So, even if the FDA says you may start your study, you cannot start your study. Okay. Does everybody here know what an institutional review board is? Anybody not know? Okay, a few people don't know. Okay. Institutional review board is a board of people, okay, and it's they are there to protect the rights and welfare of human research subjects. Who knows what we have here on campus? Who's our IRB here? Anybody know? Comer.
Woo-hoo!
The Colorado Multiple IRB, Investigational Review Board. They sit over in the 500 building. That's where my office is. Okay, in fact, I'm right down the hall from them. So they are there to protect the rights and welfare of human subjects. Now, the FDA approved the study, saying, yeah, your study design, everything looks fine. You may go ahead and proceed with your study. Before you can actually start your study, you have to get IRB approval. Okay, you cannot start your study till the IRB has looked at everything. So they're there to protect the rights and welfare of the subjects that are going to be enrolled in the study. Scientifically, you know, they agree, yes, okay, you have an IND, you have an IDE from the government. Okay, they determined that, you know, the product can move forward, but now we want to be sure the patients that are going to be enrolled in the study are not put at any undue risk. So they'll review the protocol, they will review all the other information, they'll help develop the informed consent form that are given to the subjects before they start to be sure that all the subjects are informed of all the risks and benefits associated with the study. So they review and approve the research that involves humans as research subjects. They have the authority to approve the study, require modifications in the study. If they don't like the protocol as written and they say, no, you need to do it a little bit, that's too much risk, we want you to tweak it here. Okay, so they have the ability to do that. Or they can disapprove it, say, absolutely not. I don't care if you have an IND or an IDE, the study is not being done here. If the risk is just too high, we do not want to put our patients in front of that risk. Okay, they have that. That's the rarity. You know, they very seldom disapprove. They'll just go back and say you have to revise. Okay, but if the investigator won't revise or the company won't revise the protocol, then they say, well, unless you revise it, the study is not happening here. So,
and this is a great role for advocates. Like, it's often something that you can do pretty quickly in terms of local institutions and get involved because there's never enough people to do this.
Exactly. So here it says it has to be made up of at least 5 individuals. Most IRBs have more than 5. So most IRBs have multiple boards. Okay, so they have a whole bunch of different people that, you know, the board A, board B, board C, and, you know, each one will review specific protocols. But they have to have at least 5 individuals. One has to be a scientist, one a non-scientist, and one individual who is not affiliated with the institution. Many times it could be somebody from the general community that has a scientific interest or a scientific background. They don't work for the company, they don't work for the university. Basically a layperson, but has some scientific knowledge that they can understand the protocol and look at it from a layperson standpoint versus from a scientific standpoint.
Yes? To give an unbiased opinion.
Exactly, exactly. So that's generally the makeup, and as I said, it's usually more than the 5, but by regulation they have to have at least 5 people on the board. So what will they look at? Criteria for approval. What are the risks that the subjects are going to be dealing with, and have they been minimized? So they look at the clinical protocol. What safety factors have you built into your protocol to ensure that the risks are minimized? Okay, it could be as far as, you know, what drugs can't you be on, or could be general, you know, what types of patients are you going to enroll? You're not going to enroll, you know, minors in the study. Okay, you're not going to enroll people with certain diseases because there'd be a risk to use that drug or that device with certain diseases. So they'll look at the risks that are inherent with the protocol, and then they will try to minimize those risks, types of things. So make sure that the protocol, you enroll patients that are not going to be harmed. Okay, generally, yes.
Well, on one of the slides before, there was a clinical trial, and the subjects were between the ages of 50 and 75.
Right.
So my question is, when the IRB approves the individuals, are they required to have, like, say, a difference in demographics, like across the board, different people of different ages, races? Is that required or no?
Not generally required, but from a statistical standpoint, you know, you don't want to. From a statistical and down the road from marketing, once it's approved, you don't want to, you know, have, you know, if you only study patients between the ages of 25 and 30 in clinical research, and you proved in that group of patients that it was good, you're labeling and saying this product can only be used for patients 25 to 30 years old. You haven't shown, you know, an 80-year-old and a 20-year-old. So yeah, it's very important that your inclusion criteria are such that it's got to be product specific, you know, depending on what type of product, what type of drug, what type of device, but also what is the population you want to be able to market it to. Okay. We're going to get into a little bit more of that. This is in general. Okay. I'm going to get into the phases, and that'll maybe clear it up a little bit more.
But, do you want to say something? Yeah, just so for NCI cancer centers, that's actually a metric. So you can't consistently enroll a bunch of people on trials that are not representative of the people that live in the area. So they
Okay.
will be held to gender, ethnicity, everything.
Exactly.
And so
Not so much, you know, from an FDA thing, but
Right.
for sure it's.
And so Doug is talking about the point where you've been funded really to do the work or had it reviewed and then you're
Right.
regular. So when that really comes up is when reviewers will say, so you have your application and it's looked at, you know, at that time, those scientific reviewers will look at it and say, hey, you know, you don't have a good representation of people. You need to go back and you need to review that, you need to do that. And then when it gets funded and approved, then we have to even still go through these steps. So that piece, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the fact that to get a cancer center grant that funds the entire cancer center, they review all of your enrollments and they review your distribution by gender and ethnicity.
Okay.
So it's, I mean, that's just to make you feel like at least at some level someone's watching that because it is an
Right,
issue.
that's my, yeah.
So a lot of cancer centers get in trouble with that. And the reviewers will disapprove, you know, them because they basically don't have adequate distribution according to where they're located.
But if where you're located, it has a,
I mean, like
Has a very
where we are
specific-
now. I mean,
yes.
like-
I get it, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a
Yeah,
demographic
sure.
for that particular area where
Exactly.
the cancer center is
That's
located
what
that
they call
determines the
catchment
sample.
area, yes.
Okay.
Believe me, there's some that are way off. You know.
So again, the risks are reasonable, as we said, you know, they'd be minimized, and they have to be reasonable. Okay, if they're unreasonable risks, you know, as they said, that they're not going to approve the study at that point. And how the subjects are selected is equitable. And we talked about the inclusion-exclusion criteria. And make sure you're not, you know, for the lack of a better term, cherry-picking your subjects, okay, type of thing. So it's got to be reasonable, it's got to be equitable, same, you know, I'm not going to say you're going to have the same amount of men and women, or females and males, but, you know, it's got to be open to males, females, unless it's a male-specific drug or a male-specific device or something like that, obviously. But if it's cross-gender, you know, it's got to be equitable. You cannot be picking and choosing, except for they have to have, you know, this disease condition and this age
Right.
group and so forth.
Okay.
Also, informed consent will be sought from each prospective subject or the subject's legally authorized representative. So you have your inclusion-exclusion criteria. The investigator goes out, starts recruiting subjects, okay? They can't pick and choose based on, well, I really don't like that guy. You know, I don't want him in my study. Type of thing. Versus, no, he's got this disease process, which is exclusive type of thing. So they have to be very, you know, open and informed. And they have to, you know, look for every possible patient that may qualify for the study based on their own personal opinion of that person. Now, it says from each prospective subject or the subject's legally authorized representative. What is meant by that? Anybody want to take a, I'll just throw it out there. I want you guys to think too. Yes?
Well, it could be either the subject themselves or if they're not able to give their own legal representation. Also, if it's a body part, if the person, like if it's a tumor, since that person is passed on, so he's the legal representative of that material.
Okay. All right, that's a good explanation. Basically, you know, if the subject is married, okay, the husband or wife could be the legally authorized representative. If they're not married, okay, you have a single person. Who can be the legally authorized representative at that point? A parent, okay. If they don't have any parents, parents have passed away, you're not married, you don't have a spouse, brothers or sisters, something of that nature, okay. And when you're in doubt, you would check with the IRB, okay. You know, we have this patient, he has no brothers and sisters, he has no parents. Who could be a legally authorized representative? You have to go to the IRB and get their input on that and find out who could sign for this patient, because either he's incompetent, he's in a coma, whatever reason, you know, legally he cannot sign anything for himself. So, but that, the way the regulations are written, that's what they say. Subject or the subject's legally authorized representative. Now you may have to go to the court and get somebody assigned to be their legally authorized representative at that point. Now, the only time that is bypassed if it's an emergency. If it's an emergency, life or death, and the investigational product is the only thing that's going to save that person's life, then the investigator can practice his medicine or her medicine and do it, and after the fact, you know, get the approvals or something like that. But again, you're going to go, if there's time, you need to go to the IRB, saying, hey, we have nobody, he's going to die in 12 hours if I don't get this thing in him. And we have nobody to sign for him. You know, get the IRB's involvement first before they, you know, if it's a matter of 15 minutes before they die, it's a different story. Okay. Make sure the informed consent will be appropriately documented in accordance with the regulations. What does that mean? Your physician, he's going to enroll you in a clinical trial. He gets you to sign the informed consent. Is that all there is? Where does it have to be documented? Anywhere? In the medical record. Okay? If it's in his office medical record, if it's in the hospital medical record, it's got to be documented. Not just, I got the patient's informed consent. No. On this date, I spoke with the patient and the patient's legally authorized representative, the patient's spouse, the patient's neighbor. I discussed all the pros and cons about participating in the clinical trial, the risks associated with the clinical trial, how long it will be, everything about that. Everything they discussed has to be documented in the medical record, okay, from a legal standpoint, because if something happens and the patient comes back and says, my doctor never told me that, but it's documented in the medical record, you know, so you just can't say, I received informed consent from John Doe. He's got to put down everything they discuss. Okay.
And also, I would imagine non-disclosure agreements as well, right? Or is that just going to be public information? A lot of time, companies or organizations will say, I need you to sign a non-disclosure agreement that the patient is undergoing.
Right.
Special treatment.
Exactly.
It's
yeah. Once the patient's in the study, it's not public knowledge. It stays within the institution, within the investigator's control. You know, that's why they don't they assign codes to the patient. They don't use patient name. Now you're patient 123. Okay, so nobody knows who 123 is except for the research staff. Okay, even the IRB wouldn't know. The IRB just knows it's patient 123, you know, type of thing. Just the physician, the investigator, his staff that's working on the study are the people that would know who the patient really is. Okay, and there's a log that is kept, and there should be a main log of patient 001 is John Doe, patient 002 is Jane Doe. Okay, that is kept, you know, separate. Okay, but anytime anybody has access to the records, it's always by 001, 002, 003, whatever convention they're using.
So unfortunately, you got a little shortchanged. Our lunch is here, but we're not done. You get a little bit more time, but we only have lunch reserved for a little while. So you're going to join us at lunch, right?
Sure.
Okay, perfect. So I'd ask him
so
just
because basically saying you're between us and lunch.
Exactly. So I was just looking at getting text from the caterers. Can we spend about maybe 3 to 5 more minutes and then go?
Sure.
Good? Okay.
Sure. I can go faster.
Okay.
Any questions so far? I can talk fast. New Yorkers talk funny and they can talk fast.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, I tried more IRB stuff. Research plan makes adequate provision for monitoring the data. Monitoring the data. Okay. Physician is not working by himself or the investigator. Yes, he's collecting the data, his staff is collecting the data, they're recording the data, putting it into a computer, putting it into a notebook, whatever. Okay, but somebody has to monitor the investigator. If this world was a pristine world, everybody could be trusted and nobody would do something. Like I said, I've been in clinical research for over 20 years. There are things I've seen that you would just flip your hat off. It's like forgeries, making stuff up. It's like, what were you thinking? It's like, and you know, the site gets closed down. Go to the IRB, go, we found this. They forged this document. They signed the patient's signature on the informed consent form. I'm going, yeah.
And I just want to say, so that happens, but it's not the norm. It really isn't the norm. And it's not the norm in academic medicine. It's very different when it's something's getting approved by FDA to be sold, as opposed to.
Well, and it's, you know, so cancer is different, like you know, but you know, studies are done in patients, and a lot of these are like normal volunteer studies, where you get into these massively huge studies of looking at something where they get one dose, and it gets much sloppier because there's really, that person's just being followed by a clinical research coordinator, but they're not a patient, they're a, you know, a normal volunteer.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot, you know, people think clinical research is, you know, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that you're not familiar with, and for most of my 20 years I was a monitor. I worked for the companies and we went out and we monitored our investigators. So I spent countless hours just going through charts. And like you said, 99.5% are good. That 0.5% that are out there that think they can get away with it. It's
What
just...
makes a pregnant woman more vulnerable?
I was wondering that too.
What makes a
Pregnant woman vulnerable?
Oh, it's...
Where is this one?
Oh,
Children, prisoners, pregnant women, mentally disabled persons.
Okay, vulnerable population, okay. They may say, well, you know, you may lose your baby if you don't get into this, you know, something like that. But also, you have two people to consider now. If she's pregnant and you're giving an investigational drug, you know, you're dealing with the fetus and so, you know, and the patient. So it's a vulnerable population at that point. So you have to be very careful versus just a straight person. When some or all the subjects are likely to be vulnerable to coercion or undue influence, such as children, prisoners, pregnant women, mentally disabled, okay, there have to be safeguards in place to ensure that these people are not taken advantage of. Okay? Especially if you're illiterate, mentally disabled, you know, who is the legally authorized representative at that point, so forth. So these are all things that IRBs look at, and what types of populations are you going to be enrolling, and if they meet any of these, how are you going to deal with that? What safeguards, what things have you put into place to ensure that you do not do something that you shouldn't be doing in these types of patients? Okay? You want to stop now before I change?
What else do you have left? We've done informed consent.
Yeah, we're still on informed consent. We could stop here and just, if you want, it's up to you.
Yeah, why don't you just give one or two quick highlights, I think the high points for the
Okay, so informed consent for research regulations required, as we talked about. No investigator may involve a human being unless they have obtained a legally effective informed consent, okay, meaning there has to be a witness, okay, and it has to be documented, or the subject or the subject's legally authorized, of the subject or the legally authorized representative. So they cannot include, unless it's an emergency situation, and then, you know, there's a different way of going about it, but generally speaking, it has to be a legally effective informed consent. So it has to be the person signing the consent, there has to be a witness to the consent, okay, and if they are not mentally capable of doing it, who their legally authorized representative is, does the same thing.
Perfect. So I think what we will do right now, so thank you so much. Doug, round of applause, yay. So what we'll do is we have some additional slides that we'll go through, and then you're going to be available at lunch too. And so we'll be able to have some additional discussion about the things that we maybe didn't cover here.
Sure. Any questions? Shoot them.
Yeah, we'll definitely. So let's go ahead, just because I want to make sure that you guys get warm food because it's a cold day. So here's one thing I just want to quickly mention. So Sharon and I are going to escort you to our lunch location if you get lost. And I would recommend that you, and not to scare anybody, you're not going to, but if you decide to take, you know, your own time, you're welcome to that and the like. There is a map in the back of your, which really outlines the entire campus. And here in the Research 2, which reflects with your agenda, Research 2 for lunch. So I would probably recommend that if you're going to be joining everyone for lunch and not taking your own lunch break, which you're welcome if you like, but if you kind of stick with Sharon and I, and we can escort you, and it just would be a little more quick to get there. So